The cabin was already humming with the restless rhythm of travel. The shuffle of bags into overhead bins, the click of buckles snapping shut, the low murmur of passengers debating whether they'd land on time. The engines outside whined, eager to roll, while inside, first class felt like a cocoon of privilege. Champagne glasses tinkled faintly. Flight attendants moved with polished efficiency, and the world seemed to shrink to this polished corridor of leather seats and quiet conversations. Then the intercom cracked. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a short delay before departure." The voice was clipped, almost sharp, not the smooth, practiced calm passengers expected. A ripple of curiosity passed through the cabin. Heads tilted, phones paused mid-scroll. A woman in 2B, platinum card dangling from her lanyard, sighed impatiently. The cockpit door opened, and out stepped the pilot. He didn't glance left or right. His stride was taut, military-like, the kind of walk that commanded attention even before his voice did. He marched straight down the narrow aisle, stopped in front of seat 2A and pointed. Him. The word wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. His jaw was set, eyes flat, and the silence in that second said more than 1,000 announcements. Finally, the words came, blunt, cold, and clear enough to slice the cabin in half. "I will not fly this aircraft with that passenger on board." Gasps, audible ones, not dramatic or forced, but real, raw shock pulled out of throats before people could stop themselves. Every head turned toward seat 2A. The man sitting there didn't move. He was tall, dark-skinned, dressed simply, a fitted black polo, dark jeans, clean gray sneakers. No flashy watch, no corporate badge. His carry-on was slim, tucked neatly under the seat, no logos, no status symbols. Just a man, seated calm, with a tablet resting lightly in his hands. He didn't rise. He didn't argue. He simply looked up, his expression unreadable. The silence that followed was suffocating. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, pretending to check their phones. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, already fumbling for their cameras. One teenager's phone was already recording, red light blinking. A whisper leaked across the cabin. "Is this happening right now?" A flight attendant hurried forward. Blonde hair pulled into a perfect knot. Her corporate smile welded to her face. "Captain," she said carefully, "perhaps we should—" The pilot cut her off. "No discussion. This flight does not leave the ground with him on board. That's my final word." The words landed like a gavel. The man in 2A blinked once, slowly. He didn't flinch, didn't rise, didn't defend himself. He simply laid the tablet on his lap and folded his hands. "Is there a problem with my seat?" His voice was calm, deliberate, the kind of tone that carried without needing volume. The pilot's nostrils flared. "There's a problem with you being in it." That was when the cabin changed. The woman in 2B smirked, leaning back as if vindicated. A businessman in 3C muttered something about delays costing money. The blonde attendant tightened her posture, avoiding the man's eyes. And somewhere near the back, a passenger whispered too loudly, "You know why?" The weight of it settled. Everyone knew what this was, even those who pretended not to. The man in 2A, Langston Reed, though no one knew his name yet, exhaled slowly. He looked down once at the boarding pass tucked into his tablet cover, then back up at the pilot. "My ticket scanned green," he said softly. The pilot's lips thinned. "Not my concern. You step off this plane, or none of these people fly today." Phones lifted higher now. Dozens of them. The red glow of recording lights dotted the cabin like fireflies in the dark. The blonde attendant cleared her throat, voice pitched high, to cut through the tension. "Sir, maybe we could reassign your seat? Perhaps." "No." The pilot's voice thundered, filling the cabin. "I don't negotiate over safety." Safety. The word hissed like poison. Passengers shifted again, unease creeping in. Safety was a shield airlines always raised, the unchallengeable excuse. But no one could explain what was unsafe about the man seated quietly in 2A, a young flight attendant. Trainee by the look of her two clean shoes, her stiff uniform, hovered uncertainly behind the senior crew. She glanced at her tablet, then at the passenger, then at the pilot. Her lips parted, closed, parted again. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling but audible. "Captain, I ran his pass. It scanned green. It matched 2A. The words cracked the silence like glass. All eyes whipped toward her. The senior attendant shot her a glare sharp enough to cut steel. Trainee, silence during escalation. She shrank back, cheeks flushing, but the truth was already loose, floating in the air like a spark in a dry forest. Langston's gaze shifted slightly toward her. Just a glance. Steady, unwavering. She felt it land like weight, not crushing, but anchoring. She straightened half an inch taller, without meaning to. The pilot, ignoring her, turned back to Langston. "Sir, I will give you one chance to deboard voluntarily. Otherwise, security will remove you." Langston tilted his head, eyes calm, voice even. "I'll wait," he said simply. "The system always tells the truth." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They carried, clear as a bell, through every row. And in that moment, the air in the cabin changed. Passengers who had been silent began whispering to each other. A man muttered, "This doesn't feel right." A woman clutched her phone tighter, whispering to her daughter, "Don't look away. This is important." The red dots of recording lights multiplied. What had begun as humiliation was no longer private. It was becoming public record, captured from half a dozen angles. The pilot stiffened. His jaw worked like stone grinding against stone. He turned toward the cockpit, barking into his radio. "Hold position. We're grounded until this is resolved." The engines outside hummed lower, restless, like a beast forced back into its cage. Inside, the tension thickened until even breathing felt intrusive. The woman in Tubi chuckled under her breath. "Always a spectacle," she muttered, just loud enough for those around her to hear. Langston didn't react. He didn't turn. He didn't defend. He simply stayed seated, calm, deliberate. And as the silence stretched, the cabin realized something that chilled him more than the pilot's command. He wasn't moving. He wasn't fighting. He was waiting. For what no one yet knew. But the weight of that silence, that refusal to be erased, pressed harder than shouting ever could. And above the murmurs, above the captain's threats, above the nervous shuffling of attendants trying to look busy, the quiet truth spread seat by seat, row by row. This wasn't about a ticket. It was about a man they decided shouldn't sit in it. And the sky itself was being held hostage until someone proved otherwise. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The engines outside idled low, a restless growl beneath the metal skin of the aircraft, but inside the cabin, silence ruled. Not the comfortable kind, not the hush of people settling in before a long flight. This was heavier. It pressed on the chest, made every cough sound too loud, made every shift of fabric scrape like thunder. The air was thick with waiting. Langston Reed still hadn't moved. Seat 2A held him steady like a throne nobody wanted to acknowledge. His posture was calm, almost casual, elbows resting lightly on the armrests, fingers folded loosely in his lap. But his stillness was a storm of its own. Around him, first-class passengers fidgeted, traded glances, tried to pretend they weren't watching when in truth, every eye in the cabin was fixed on him. The pilot hadn't gone back to the cockpit. He stood just a few feet away, jaw clenched, arms crossed, broadcasting his verdict with posture alone. The unspoken message lingered. The plane will not fly until this man is gone. A woman 2 rows back whispered, "He should just get up. It's not worth it." Her husband shook his head. "Why should he? He's got the ticket." The words hung in the air. Neither dared say what everyone knew, that this wasn't about the ticket. Langston heard them. He always heard. Years of boardrooms where he'd been the only black man at the table had trained his ears to catch the words between words, the pauses heavier than syllables. He inhaled slowly, exhaled slower. His gaze flicked once to the airline silver emblem on the bulkhead wall, then back to the pilot. "I told you," Langston said softly. "I'll wait." The quiet confidence in his tone unsettled the cabin more than shouting would have. Shouting could be dismissed as anger. Calm could not. The senior flight attendant, Cassidy, polished blonde bun, Crisp uniform, a smile stretched too tight. Crouched beside Langston, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial hush meant for him, but audible to Rose nearby. "Sir, we can avoid further issues if you just allow us to reassign you to another section." Langston tilted his head, almost gently, as though considering her words. Then he asked, "Another section or another status?" Her smile faltered. She tried again. "We just need to de-escalate." "You escalated the moment you questioned the seat, not the system," Langston replied. Cassidy stiffened, rising abruptly, lips pressed thin. She turned sharply toward the trainee, Mia, who stood near the galley, clutching her device like it might shield her. "Mia," Cassidy hissed, "do not involve yourself further. Step back." But Mia's wide eyes betrayed her conscience. She'd scanned the ticket. She knew it was valid, and though her voice shook, she whispered again, louder this time. It scanned green. Gasps fluttered like birds through the cabin. Passengers glanced at one another. Phones angled higher, try to catch every word. The businessman in 3C muttered, "I knew it." The pilot spun toward her, fury flaring. "Trainee, silence." Mia shrank back, but Langston caught her eye again. That steady, grounding look, not demanding, not pleading, just recognition. She straightened half an inch. Across the aisle, a Latina woman in 3A spoke up, voice firm but measured. "If his ticket scanned green, then what's the problem? Why are we still sitting here?" Her words cut through the hush like a blade. Cassidy whipped around, her practiced smile cracking. "Ma'am, please let the crew handle this." "No," the woman interrupted. "We've been watching you handle it, and what I see is profiling." The word landed hard. A murmur rippled across the rows. Profiling. It gave shape to what everyone had felt but hadn't dared name. The pilot's face flushed crimson. "This is about flight safety, nothing else," he barked, louder than necessary. Langston leaned back slightly in his seat, eyes calm, voice low but cutting. "Safety didn't scan my ticket. Your system did." Phones caught every syllable. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of tension, of judgment, of passengers deciding what side of the moment they'd be on. Some shifted uncomfortably, eyes dropping to their laps. Others nodded quietly, unseen solidarity. A teenager whispered to his mother, "He's right. It scanned. I saw it." Cassidy's composure wavered. She pulled out her tablet, fingers tapping frantically, her brows furrowed. She froze. The display was clear. 2A, read Langston. Status verified. But she said nothing. Langston didn't press. He didn't need to. He simply sat, waiting, letting the silence itself demand honesty. And the silence grew unbearable. Passengers began to whisper louder now, no longer hiding it. Unbelievable. They're really going to throw him off? He paid for that seat. The weight of collective awareness was shifting. What had begun as one man against a system was slowly becoming a cabin against a lie. The pilot, sensing a control slipping, barked into his radio again. Security to the cabin. Immediate. Gasps again. Phones lifted higher. A man muttered, "He hasn't even done anything." Langston's eyes stayed steady, his tone calm. "I'll wait." He wasn't just talking about the crew anymore. He was talking to the room, to history, to the quiet pattern he'd lived 1,000 times before, waiting for the truth to catch up with the lie. And slowly, passengers started realizing they weren't just witnesses. They were participants. The Latina woman in 3A folded her arms, chin lifted. The husband in 4B whispered, "This is wrong," a little louder this time. Even the teenager, still recording, said aloud, "Mom, look, he's somebody. I think I've seen him before." The tide was turning, seat by seat, voice by voice. And still, Langston Reed didn't raise his. Because sometimes power wasn't noise. It was silence. The request for security hung in the air like a storm siren. The words hadn't just been heard. They had been absorbed, swallowed by every ear in the cabin. And with them, the atmosphere shifted again, from uncomfortable to dangerous. Passengers whispered urgently now. Phones tilted higher, their red lights blinking like warning beacons. One woman muttered to her husband, "They're really calling security on him? For sitting in his seat?" The pilot stood tall in the aisle, arms folded, voice clipped with authority. "This aircraft does not move until his passenger is removed. Safety is not up for debate. Safety." He leaned on the word like it was armor. Langston Reed stayed seated. Calm. Still. Hands folded loosely. The tablet resting like an unspoken threat on his lap. His eyes never left the pilot's, and though his voice was soft, it carried. "Safety is following protocol. Your system cleared me. Your crew confirmed me. The only risk here is your refusal to see it." A gasp rippled through the rows. The trainee, Mia, froze near the galley, eyes darting between the pilot and the man in 2A. Her heart pounded in her chest, but Langston's gaze found her again. That steady look, as if he were lending her spine where her training manual hadn't. She took a single step forward. "He scanned green," she said, louder this time, clearer. Her voice trembled at the edges, but the truth rang anyway. The senior attendant, Cassidy, snapped around, hissing, "Mia, step back now." But it was too late. The words had already been spoken, carried across the cabin, recorded by a dozen phones. A businessman leaned forward in 3C, nodding. She said it twice now. "The ticket's valid." The Latina woman in 3A added, louder this time, "Exactly. He's done nothing wrong. Why are we still grounded?" The murmur swelled into a current, seat by seat, row by row. No longer scattered whispers. This was momentum. The pilot's jaw flexed, red climbing into his cheeks. He turned, glaring at the crew clustered near the galley. "This is not up for discussion. Remove him." But no one moved. Not yet. The engines outside whined higher for a moment, then fell back to a low grumble. The entire aircraft seemed to be holding its breath. Langston leaned back, unhurried, his voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "If you remove me, your flight doesn't leave the ground. Not today. Not tomorrow." Gas again, sharper this time. A passenger whispered, "What does he mean?" Another murmured, "He's somebody. I know it." Cassidy stepped in again, forcing composure. "Sir, please, let us resolve this quietly. Step off the aircraft and we'll—" Langston didn't let her finish. His words were calm, precise, and final. "No, I'll wait." The weight of those 3 words pulled the cabin taut. Because the truth wasn't just a silence anymore. It was a silence of everyone who saw what was happening and knew it wasn't right. The pilot slammed a hand against the bulkhead, frustration spilling out. "This plane is not moving until he's gone." And then the intercom crackled. "Attention, crew. Please remain at your stations. Security has been notified and is en route." A wave of unease rippled through the cabin. Mothers pulled children closer. The teenager filming whispered, "This is insane." He hasn't even raised his voice. The Latina woman shook her head. "He doesn't need to. Look at him." Langston sat unmoving, eyes steady, posture calm, the only person in the cabin who wasn't visibly unraveling. Minutes stretched like hours. The hum of the engines felt more like a growl now, impatient, restrained. And then came the heavy footsteps. 2 airline security officers entered the cabin, their uniforms pressed, their eyes alert, their presence a wall of intimidation. The pilot straightened, relief flashing across his face. "Remove him," the pilot ordered, jabbing a finger toward 2A. The taller officer paused. "On what grounds?" The cabin stilled. The pilot faltered, then barked. Passengers refusing to comply with crew instructions. "He's a threat to safety." The taller officer's eyes flicked to Langston. The man in 2A didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply tilted the tablet on his lap, slightly, just enough for the officer to see the glowing screen. The officer blinked. "Sir, what is this?" Langston answered softly, "Verification. You may want to wait 90 seconds before you act." The officer's brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" Langston's tone was steady, deliberate. "I suggest you check your system." Phones caught every syllable. Cassidy stiffened, pale. Mia's eyes widened. The cabin leaned in, hungry, waiting. The officer hesitated, pulling out his own device. His fingers tapped quickly. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He looked at his partner, whispered something low, urgent. Passengers noticed. Gasps spread again. What's happening? Something's wrong. The pilot stepped forward, furious. Remove him now. That's an order. The taller officer turned, his voice lower, heavier. Captain, maybe we should. I said remove him, the pilot barked, face flushed crimson. Langston spoke again, calm, precise. Remove me. And this airline doesn't just lose a flight. It loses far more. The words hit like a thunderclap. Passengers began whispering louder, openly now. He owns something, doesn't he? He must. This feels bigger than a seat. The Latina woman leaned forward again, her voice steady as stone. We all see what's happening here. He hasn't done a thing. He's just sitting in his seat. You don't like how he looks in it. Silence followed, then a low murmur of agreement. For the first time, the current had shifted fully. The crowd wasn't just recording anymore. They were siding. The pilot sensed it, desperation sharpening his tone. You're all being manipulated. He's making a scene for sympathy. Langston turned toward him slowly, finally meeting his fury head-on. I don't need sympathy, he said quietly. I own the system you're afraid of. The cabin gasped as one. The teenager nearly dropped his phone. Mom, he whispered. I Googled him. He's on Forbes. He owns part of the airline. Phones whipped up faster, catching his words. The murmurs surged into a wave. The pilot's face drained of color. Cassidy froze, lips parted but no sound coming. Mia stood taller, her eyes fixed on Langston with something close to awe. The taller officer swallowed hard, his tone softer now. Captain, we need to verify this. Langston's voice was calm, final, undeniable. No, you need to accept it. And just like that, the escalation wasn't his anymore. It belonged to everyone watching, everyone filming, everyone whispering. What began as humiliation had become revelation, and the sky itself seemed to wait for what would come next. For a moment, the cabin felt like a jury room. Every passenger caught between disbelief and dawning clarity. The pilot's command had collapsed into silence, and all eyes turned to man in 2A, calm, unmoving, but radiating a weight no one could ignore anymore. Langston Reed lifted his tablet fully now. The screen glowed with a clean, corporate interface most had never seen, its header unmistakable. Horizon Air Executive Partner Ops, Priority Clearance. Cassidy's breath caught. She recognized it instantly, the system reserved for owners and top-tier corporate partners. It wasn't something you could fake. The taller officer leaned closer, squinting. His voice dropped an octave. Sir, your clearance level is 6? Langston nodded once. Calm. Certain. The officer exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carried both relief and fear. He straightened, turned toward the pilot, and said firmly, Captain, this passenger's authorized. Higher than you. Higher than me. Gasps rippled across the rows. Passengers whispered urgently. Phones zoomed in closer, the red dots glowing like dozens of spotlights aimed at the unfolding stage. The pilot froze, his face caught between disbelief and rage. That's impossible. No passenger. Langston cut him off, his voice calm but razor sharp. I'm not just a passenger. I am a partner owner of this airline. And right now, every action you take is under review. The words detonated in the cabin. The Latina woman in 3A leaned back with a satisfied shake of her head. I knew it. I knew he was somebody. The teenager whispered frantically to his mother. See? I told you. He's on Forbes. He's rich like billionaire rich. Cassidy stumbled back a step, her polished smile fracturing into panic. Her tablet buzzed in her hand. She glanced down, and her blood ran cold. Priority oversight alert. Cabin 417, under live review. Corporate was watching. Right now. The intercom clicked, and a new voice filled the cabin. Female, smooth, controlled, undeniably corporate. This is Horizon Air oversight. Cabin 417 is now under live review. All crew members are to comply with internal directives. Non-compliance will be noted. Phones shot higher. Passengers gasped. Some even clapped softly. Cassidy's face drained of color. The pilot's eyes widened. What? How? Langston finally stood. He didn't raise his hands, didn't raise his voice. His very presence was enough. He turned slowly, let his gaze pass across the passengers, the crew, the blinking phones capturing every detail. My name, he said clearly, is Langston Reed. I am the founder and CEO of North Point Capital. And yes, he paused, letting the silence thicken, letting the weight of the moment land. I own 21% of Horizon Air. The gasp that followed wasn't just shock. It was seismic. A woman clutched her pearls. A man dropped his phone. A young couple exchanged wide-eyed looks of disbelief. Someone whispered, "He owns the airline." The pilot's mouth opened, then closed. His face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. This is outrageous," he stammered. "He's making a scene." Langston turned his gaze directly on him. His tone was soft, but each word carried like a verdict. "The only scene here is yours. You refuse to fly your own aircraft because of who you saw in this seat. Not what the ticket said. Not what the system said. Just what you assumed." Phones caught it all. The taller officer's earpiece crackled. He nodded, then turned to pilot. "Captain, corporate has confirmed. You are relieved of duty pending review." The cabin erupted. Gasps, whispers, even a few cheers. Passengers clapped, some openly, some cautiously, but all with a sense they were watching something historic. The pilot's jaw dropped. "You can't do this. I'm the captain of this aircraft." Langston's eyes didn't waver. "Not anymore." Cassidy's tablet buzzed again. She glanced down, trembling. A red banner stretched across her screen. "Immediate suspension pending review. Flight Service Lead Cassidy Reynolds." Her knees nearly buckled. No, please, this can't be happening." Langston finally turned toward her, voice steady. "It didn't have to. You made choices. You saw the truth, and you buried it. That's not service. That's silence." Mia, the trainee, stood frozen near the galley, eyes wide, torn between fear and awe. Then her device buzzed. She glanced down and gasped audibly. "Temporary lead assignment, cabin 417. Her hand flew to her mouth. Passengers craned their necks, whispering. The trainee? They promoted her. Langston gave her a single, steady nod. "You spoke when others folded. That's leadership." Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she stood taller, shoulders back, finally believing it. The intercom crackled again. The corporate voice returned. "This flight will continue under replacement command. Captain Holtz, please proceed to the cockpit." An older pilot emerged from the forward galley. Silver hair, calm eyes, authority radiating from his stride. He looked once at the relieved captain, then at Langston. His nod was small, but it carried meaning, respect. The passengers erupted into applause. Not roaring, not chaotic, measured, deliberate, reverent. The cabin had flipped. Where once silence had been complicity, now sound was solidarity. The disgraced captain stood frozen, his authority dissolving before the very people he thought he commanded. His voice cracked with desperation. "You're ruining me. You don't understand the politics." Langston's reply was surgical. "No, Captain, you ruined yourself the moment you decided my presence was a threat. And the politics? Those belong to me." Phones recorded every word. The taller officer stepped forward. "Captain, you'll deboard now." The man sputtered, resisted, then wilted as the weight of inevitability crushed him. He gathered his bag with shaking hands, shoulders hunched, face ashen. The passengers watched in silence, some shaking their heads, others recording his walk of shame. Cassidy tried to melt into the background, but her tablet buzzed again. This time, the message was final. Access revoked. Badge disabled. Report immediately upon landing. She covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Langston glanced at her, not with anger, but with truth. You didn't need to mean it. You only needed to see it. And you chose not to. Her shoulders slumped, her polished facade crumbling. Langston turned back to the cabin, his voice rising just enough to carry, not to shout. Today was not about a seat. It was about a system. And you all saw it, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. The question now is simple. Will you keep pretending it doesn't exist, or will you remember what you witnessed here? The cabin was silent. Not from fear this time. From weight. From recognition. From the collective realization that they had been witnesses to something larger than a delay. Phones kept recording, but some passengers lowered theirs now, not out of disinterest, but respect. Langston sat back down in 2A. This time, no one questioned it. And in that silence, justice settled into the cabin like gravity. The engines hummed steady again, no longer restless but resolute. With the disgraced captain escorted off the aircraft and a replacement at the helm, the cabin finally began to settle. Yet no one could mistake the truth. This wasn't just another delayed departure. Passengers leaned into their seats, adrenaline still pumping, whispering fragments of what they'd just witnessed. He owns the airline. They suspended her right there. Did you see? This video is going viral tonight. Mark my words. Dozens of phones buzzed in unison as clips were uploaded, reshared, and stitched across the digital world. By the time the aircraft taxied for takeoff, hashtags were already trending. By the time the wheels lifted from the ground, news outlets were scrambling. In the forward cabin, Langston Reed sat again in 2A, the seat they had tried to erase him from. His posture was unchanged, steady, composed, deliberate. The only difference now was that the silence around him was no longer loaded with suspicion. It was filled with awe. The Latina woman in 3A leaned across the aisle. "Mr. Reed," she said softly, "thank you for not backing down, for showing us what it looks like when silence has a limit." Langston inclined his head once, his expression measured. The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs witnesses. Her eyes glistened as she nodded. We all were. Mia stood near the galley, tablet clutched in her trembling hands. Her badge now bore her name beside the title cabin lead. Temporary assignment. She had spoken when silence would have been easier, and the weight of that choice was still sinking in. Langston's eyes found hers again. He gave her the faintest of nods. Not performative, not dramatic, just acknowledgement. She swallowed hard and stood taller. The intercom crackled to life. The new captain's voice carried calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We will be departing shortly. On behalf of Horizon Air, and especially on behalf of our executive partner, Mr. Langston Reed, thank you for your understanding." Applause broke out. Not thunderous, but intentional. People clapped not because it was protocol, but because it felt like justice. Langston didn't wave, didn't smile. He simply placed his tablet face down on his lap and closed his eyes briefly, letting the moment pass through him. By the time the plane was in the air, news alerts were exploding across the globe. Breaking. Horizon Air pilot refuses to fly with Black CEO on board. Passenger revealed to be airline stakeholder Langston Reed. Stock plummets $200 million as video of incident goes viral. Markets move faster than engines. Horizon's valuation shed $200 million before the plane even reached cruising altitude. Investors panicked. Analysts speculated. And boardrooms buzzed with the same question. How could this happen in 2025? But in 2A, Langston Reed wasn't watching stock tickers. He wasn't checking trending hashtags. He sat quietly, gazing out the window as clouds drifted past, his reflection layered against the sky. He thought of Charlotte, 1998, 16 years old, turned away from a hotel lobby because the doorman didn't believe he belonged there. He thought of the boardroom in 2007, where he'd pitched for billions only to be mistaken for the help. He thought of every mistake, every misunderstanding, every moment someone tried to shrink him. And now here he was, in the seat they tried to take. The same silence they once used against him was now his weapon, his shield, his truth. The cabin began to shift from tension to relief. Conversations rose softly, measured, as if people were still afraid to disturb the weight of what they'd seen. But gradually, a different kind of energy filled the air. Courage. A woman in 5 bespoke to her seatmate. They made my son cry last year because his ID didn't match his boarding pass. No apology, nothing. A man in 40 added. My wife was forced off a plane once. They said her bag looked suspicious. All she had was a stroller. Passengers leaned in, swapping stories, sharing wounds they had never spoken aloud in public spaces. It was as if Langston's refusal had cracked something open, not just in Horizon Air, but in everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Mia listened, heart racing, realizing that leadership wasn't about reading from a manual. It was about holding the line when no one else dared. Langston listened too, not as a CEO, not as an owner, but as a witness. He let their words flow, let their stories breathe. And when the silence returned, he said, simply, "This isn't the first time. But if I can help it, it will be the last time anyone here watches and says nothing." The cabin stilled again, not from fear, but from recognition. Hours later, when the aircraft touched down, reporters were already waiting. Cameras flashed at the gate, headlines blared, investors scrambled. The disgraced captain, Cassidy, and the senior officers had been quietly escorted to a side exit, their careers dissolving in real time. But the real story wasn't their downfall. It was a man who walked calmly through the terminal, no entourage, no fanfare, just Langston Reed, silent, deliberate, powerful in his refusal to perform. His phone buzzed once. A message from Horizon's executive board. Incident resolved. Oversight confirmed. Market loss. $200 million. Corrective measures underway. He tapped the screen off without replying. Because for Langston Reed, this wasn't about markets or headlines. It wasn't even about Horizon. It was about a seat, a simple seat, and the truth that some people still couldn't see a man like him in it. Back in the cabin, Mia lingered as passengers to board, her badge still flashing with the words cabin lead. She caught his eye one last time. "Mr. Reed," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "Thank you for giving me the courage to speak." Langston shook his head slightly. "No, you already had it. You just needed a moment to use it." Her eyes welled. She nodded, and in that instant, she knew her life had changed forever. Outside, as Langston stepped into the terminal, a cluster of cameras swiveled, lights flashing, reporters shouting questions. "Mr. Reed, how do you respond to Horizon's $200 million loss today? Do you plan to sue the airline you partially own? Was this staged to send a message?" Langston paused only briefly, his eyes steady, his voice calm. "The message," he said, "was written the moment a man in 2A was treated as a risk instead of a passenger. I didn't stage it. I just refused to erase it." He turned, walked on, and didn't look back. In the days that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. Horizon executives scrambled to contain the damage. Lawsuits mounted. The captain was fired. Cassidy suspended indefinitely. Corporate culture dragged into the spotlight. The airline's value continued to tumble. But the world didn't remember the numbers. They remembered the silence in 2A. The stillness of a man who refused to move. The calm that spoke louder than rage ever could. And the truth that when he finally did stand, it wasn't to shout, but to reveal. Langston Reed sat once again in his office days later, overlooking the city skyline. The storm outside Horizon Air still raged, but here, in his quiet corner of glass and steel, calm reigned. His assistant entered, tablet in hand. "Sir, the media is still calling. Do you want to issue a statement?" Langston looked out the window, at the planes crossing the horizon. His voice was soft, final. "No, the statement's already been made. The whole world heard it." He leaned back, hands folded, eyes steady. Because some victories aren't measured in headlines or markets. They're measured in the silence that follows, the silence that says, "Justice landed." If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.